Hi everyone in POS 340. As we enter Module 6 on conflict resolution and peace building, I wanted to take a few minutes to ground our theoretical learning on conflict and peace building in a real world crisis that I'm following very closely, which is the conflict in the Sudan. And then at the end of this, offer you some guidance for your upcoming Human Rights Advisory memo, which is due this Friday by midnight. So let's start first with a current global example that illustrates the challenges of building peace after violence, which you're learning about in this module, and that's in the Sudan. So the Sudan used to be one country, and then South Sudan seceded, becoming what is now the youngest country in the world. And dividing up Sudan did not seem to be a long-term solution to Sudan's decades-long war. As many of you have seen in the news, Sudan continues to endure one of the world's most, in my opinion, underreported, along with Yemen, underreported humanitarian crises, which stems from the power struggles between the Sudanese armed forces and what's called the Rapid Support Forces. So one is the official military and one is not. And this violent conflict, which it reignited last month was 2 years ago. So April of 2023 has now displaced over 8 million people, which is slightly larger than the population of the city of Phoenix, according to the United Nations, and it has created catastrophic levels of food insecurity and medical collapse. So in the case of Sudan, why has peace been so elusive? This is exactly the type of question that we're asking in this module. Chapter 7 of your Clapham reading gives us some frameworks for understanding why peace deals often fail. In fact, across history, most peace deals fail. It is a minority of peace deals that actually lead to lasting peace. From elite power struggles to a lack of enforcement mechanisms, there's lots of reasons why peace deals fail. Meanwhile, the Council on Foreign Relations video about the Taliban's resilience, that video in particular highlights the role of ideology, usually religious ideology, but not always. It can be nationalist. Social structures and informal economies in sustaining long-term conflict. Sudan right now is experiencing similar dynamics to that of Afghanistan. Armed groups benefiting from regional instability, weak civilian institutions, and external actors who are more focused on influence than peace. So this week, I want you to think critically about the difference between ending violence and building peace. It used to be, certainly post-World War II, the idea was if there's no violence, we have succeeded. Now, in the 21st century, that's not our goal. Our goal is not only ending violence, but also enhancing human well-being and human security through healthcare systems, school systems, roads, bridges, and other infrastructure, and actually helping people thrive beyond just there is no more violence. So I want you to think, as you learn from the Snyder piece on truth and reconciliation, about how healing is more than just political compromise. It requires acknowledging trauma, building inclusive institutions that include those who have been traumatized and harmed by the conflict, and often rewriting entire national narratives. Rwanda is a really good example of that, actually. So that is just something I want you to keep in mind as you read the news. Think about Sudan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Rwanda, and what you read about those case studies speaks very much to our content this week about how we can not just end violence, but actively build peace. Now, I have actually already received some early bird human rights advisory memos, but it is not required. Your advisory memo due this Friday Here's a couple of tips because there's a good chance that you haven't had to write during your college experience a policy memo before. Policy memo is not a research paper, quite the contrary. So keep in mind that in a policy memo, you want to, one, get very specific. It is impossible to be overly specific. That's not possible, actually. It is very easy to be too general and not specific enough. So don't just say increase funding or protect civilians. That's very general language. Propose concrete, time bound, and measurable solutions. So, for example, by 2026, the African Union should deploy a 500-person civilian peacekeeping mission in South Darfur focused on safe humanitarian corridors. That is obviously much more specific than protect civilians. The second tip, I think, for a really good human rights advisory memo is to anticipate challenges. So you want to get ahead, and whoever is reading it is going to find all the flaws in your memo. So you want to foresee the flaws that they will find and acknowledge them before it comes up. So if you're recommending justice mechanisms, like creating a new court for accountability, ask, will this solution, this court I'm suggesting, be politically feasible in a fragile state? What are the trade-offs between short-term peace and long-term justice? So things like that. Just think about how someone would argue with you. Number 3, please have a professional tone and structure. Your job is to inform and persuade a policymaker. You are not writing an academic essay. And then lastly, use concrete, real examples, draw on the readings or other information you've come across to show what has worked or not worked in the past. Those are called positive and negative case studies. So whether you're focusing on Sudan, Haiti, Myanmar, or any other case, your memo should reflect the complexity of peace building and not just what we hope should happen, but what actually can happen with the right strategy. So just remember, this is about creating conditions so that war doesn't return. It's not just about stopping war now. I look forward to reading your thoughtful and well-researched memos. You've got this.